Nightfall slowly crept over the barren farm, with only the faint sounds of nocturnal insects and the dry earth's scent lingering in the air. Princess Mira sat inside the humble cottage, staring at its thatched roof, barely holding together. She still hadn't fully comprehended that her father, the great king, had sent her to this filthy place. How could her father, who had pampered her all her life, punish her this way? Her eyes were clouded with confusion, filled with both anger and disbelief. The farmer quietly approached the fire he had lit, paying no attention to the princess, who was still complaining loudly about the place. In a deep yet calm voice, he said, "Here, things don't work the way they did in the palace. You'll have to get used to it." Mira glared at him and replied angrily, "How dare you speak to me like that? I am the princess. I am the king's daughter, and I deserve far better than this." But the farmer didn't respond, continuing to feed wood into the fire as if her words hadn't even reached him. At that moment, Mira felt an intense loneliness like never before. She had lost control, something she had never experienced. With the first light of dawn, Mira awoke to unfamiliar sounds, the crowing of roosters, birds chirping, and the wind blowing across the fields. The cottage was small, barely enough for one person, let alone a princess used to grand, lavish palaces. She tried to adjust, but everything felt strange and harsh. Bit by bit, she began to realize that this wasn't just a temporary test. Her life here could last much longer. The farmer, who appeared humble yet firm, told her, "You'll have to learn here that everything comes from work. No one will serve you food on a golden platter." His words struck her pride deeply. She couldn't bear the thought of working in the dirty soil, but eventually, she resigned to the reality. "I won't work here," she shouted in anger. He calmly responded, "If you don't work, you won't eat." He left her to ponder his words, facing her new reality. Slowly, Mira began to understand that life on the farm required much more effort and patience. Under the scorching sun, she learned how to plow the fields and plant seeds. The ground was hard, the air hot, and the wind relentlessly blew against her face. Her soft hands, accustomed to silk and gold, began to crack from the hard labor. One day, as she struggled to carry buckets of water from the nearby river, exhaustion and pain overwhelmed her. She let the buckets drop and collapsed onto the dirt, weeping bitterly. The farmer saw her, but said nothing. He offered no help. Working the land isn't easy, but it gives you what you need to survive. When she returned to the cottage that evening, she was starving. The farmer gave her a small piece of dry bread and a cup of water. She had never felt such hunger before. She ate reluctantly, but with each bite, she felt a mixture of humiliation and anger. At the same time, she knew she couldn't survive here without learning patience and hard work. One day, while Mira was working with the farmer in the field, an argument erupted between them. Mira, in a fit of rage, said, "How can you live like this? Don't you feel ashamed of your poor life? I can't stand living here." The farmer looked at her with sharp eyes and said, "Ashamed? Shame isn't in poverty. Shame is in denying the value of work, in acting like the world owes you something. Here, no one owes anyone anything." His words filled Mira with anger, but they also made her think. She had always believed her worth lay in her beauty and being the king's daughter. But here, that meant nothing. She began to wonder, who am I really? Can I find my true worth without my crown and wealth? After some time, while Mira was still trying to adjust to her new life, a great storm hit. The winds were fierce, and the sky was covered with dark, ominous clouds. The trees around the farm swayed violently, and the ground began to flood. The farmer rushed outside to try to save some crops, but Mira couldn't bring herself to venture out. That night, she sat alone in the cottage, listening to the wind howling around her. She was scared, but something inside her began to shift.